pushed down by snow. Our bodies sleep, both of us high, words come out slow. You melt into me like how autumn leaves get broken down. Spoken from your eyes, but the words are buried still. And it's a quiet ride home. And it's spoken from your eyes, but the words are buried still. And it's a quiet ride home. Bodies like leaves, both of us high, words come out slow. Into me like how autumn leaves get pushed down by snow. Our bodies sleep, both of us high, words come out slow. You melt into me like how autumn leaves get pushed down by snow. You and I would win the lottery. You and I would win the lottery.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Little Goth Panda channel. Hey Milk! Do you know Dennis Rader and Dennis Parker, they actually sit together in hell, shaking, quaking, fearing one day, somehow, some way they might just meet me. I hope so, because they're both fucking cunts. But anyway, hello everyone, welcome back to the Little Goth Panda channel. It is True Crime Friday, as it is every single Friday, and today, this one is disgusting. Today was sad. It's gonna get very, very sad. I'm not gonna lie, Milk. I'm not gonna lie. I really, 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 really gotta tell you, this one is going to fucking destroy you. I feel dead inside. I was like, I'll have wine later after the stream when I'm in bed watching TV. I'll have a glass of wine because I bought a new wine glass. Yeah, go for it. Put in the selfies group. But I've just finished the final bit of research, which is why this stream is delayed. It was meant to start 8:30. It is actually started at 9 o'clock today, which I apologise for. But I needed to get that all in. There is 15 pages full of info on this one bastard. I mean, you can probably definitely fill up way more than that if you're a psychologist, but unfortunately I am not. I'm just a girl on the internet that researches true crime because she has nothing else to do with her life. I'm just simply for guys that'll never like me back. Oh, goddamn, don't we all? So, David Parker Ray is a name that I want to forget. You want to know he looked dead? I mean, why do you want to know he looked dead? This is definitely one of those times I will have to say to everyone here, we have to show respect in this one because unfortunately with this case, unlike the other ones, I will get pictures at the very end. Hey, Barricade, what the fuck am I on about? Barricade, hi, how are you doing? Welcome to True Crime Fridays. So, unfortunately with this case, I can only show you the pictures at the end of the stream because unfortunately I did not have time to gather them up. But to be fair, it won't take me long because unfortunately there's only three people that I could really show, because unfortunately for every single victim that this man potentially had, that none of them really, only like 3 of them are confirmed and known because the bodies of the other people were never found and the names are actually unknown. Which is interesting because normally that is never the case in these situations. Oh, he sent it to me privately. You just look like so done with everyone's shit milk. You just look like I've just heard another fucking stupid comment from a stupid little dick ball bag. I'm so done with this shit now. That's what you look like. You look like me when I'm in work. So, the disclaimer has already been on the screen, but if you have arrived after the disclaimer, yes, twinning. If you have arrived after the disclaimer, let me just point it out to you very, very quickly. This is a true crime stream that we do every single Friday. We do not mean to glorify any person, any criminals that have committed any of these acts. We are not glorifying anyone in that retrospect. This is for historical and educational purposes only, and to remember the people that unfortunately were the victims of these crimes. We do this just to talk about it, and it's interesting to us personally. We are not encouraging any of these crimes on anyone else. We are not wanting these to happen to anyone at all. One thing to also say that if any donations are given out during the true crime segment of the stream, every single bit of money will be immediately donated to a charity that helps victims and helps pay for their therapy to hopefully get past the things that have happened to them or to help them cope. It does not go directly to me, and it never will do. Exactly, we're just interested in the psychology, Barricade as well. We're only interested in the psychology of these people, and that's completely it. Well, I would like to definitely say that for most of these streams, there will be the mention of murder, violence, sexual assault, rape, or child abuse. So if you are, this may upset you or trigger you. And if that is possible, maybe this isn't the stream for you. Or the YouTube video for you, because these True Crime Fridays do go up onto YouTube at the end of every single stream. Just want to point that out to everyone that I am recording this. So please watch what you say or do if you do not want it on YouTube. So, as I said, David Parker Ray is one that I kind of knew of. I knew about him as the Toy Box Killer. However, the extent of things that he did, I was I didn't know anything until this past week when I've been doing the research on this man. Is he or not? But yeah, yes. They won't put him down as one, but yes, he fucking is. So, this is very much a different kind of thing. He's a serial killer. However, there's only 3 victims that are known by name, because the other victims, their bodies were never found and their names were never recorded. So this is very, very different. David Parker Ray was known as the Toy Box Killer. He was born on the 6th of November 1939 in Belen, New Mexico. He would grow up to be one of the most sadistic serial killers the world has ever seen. And you know what? I'm going to say it. He definitely is. He started abducting, sexually assaulting, and killing women when he was only 15 years old until he was eventually captured in 1999. So across his 45-year crime spree, he could have potentially killed 63 women in multiple locations across the United States. All of it being recorded in a series of diary entries by himself. It's announced that he is dead. Spoiler alert, he's dead. So all the evidence is only in diary entries by David Parker Ray, but the toy box, which we will go on to later on, it all links up to everything that he says in the diary entries when they find all the different things that he has. So, he definitely did everything. I think the location of his body is actually unknown. For that reason. So, he was born to Cecil and Nettie Ray. He had a little sister named Peggy. Cecil was an alcoholic that would abandon the family quite often and would only return every 6 months or so, but his visits were terrifying for David. Even when he would be nice to him, he would show him violent pornographic images which left a mark on David's mind. Now, the violent pornographic images have been noted that in the 1940s they were known to be extreme, but in our time, it'd be classed as not exactly normal, but it wouldn't be as shocking. Don't feel sorry for him. Never feel sorry for him. Never feel sorry for them. So many people have had weird shit like this happen to them in their lifetimes and they don't go on to do this shit. Never feel sorry for these people. I will put this down now. Like, you get help. You can have the opportunity to get help, but the thing is, some people just don't know right from wrong at the end of the day. So he didn't have any other if his dad wasn't like that, would he have been good? No. Nope. And I'll tell you why. He didn't have any... Hey, Gay Vibes, how you doing? He didn't have any other adults in his life that gave him a positive outlook on life. Gay Vibes do need to point out today, utter 100% respect for every single person, everything that we talk about in the true crime segment. This one is really fucking dark. So he didn't have any other adults in his life that gave him a positive outlook on life. Not as much is known about his mother, Nettie, other than that she eventually left Cecil and took Peggy to go live with her sister. She often neglected David. Some say that she may have been an alcoholic or a drug addict. Close your window. Just close the curtains. Ignore him. David said that his auntie was the one who took care of him quite a lot. Most of the time when his parents weren't around, though, David recalls this time as anything but sweet. He recalls that she would force him to have sex with her, and it's not clear when this actually began, other than that it lasted for years. This got worse when she forced him to take part in her twisted sexual fantasy. So she was a bit of a sexual sadist, which would eventually be something that would carry on with David, with himself, throughout the rest of his life. So according to experts, it's possible that his aunt had an intense drug addiction, just like the rest of her family, and various other mental health issues. And with the burden of her sister's children on her, she let out all of her frustration onto David, and only David. Peggy was never a victim of any of this, from what is known. Because of the images and violent sexual fantasies of his family members thrown at him at a young age, this left a damaging effect on David, and later on, David wouldn't be able to separate the idea of violence and sex, and in his mind, sex had to include pain and intense violence on the other person, preferably the woman. After David turned 10 in the early 1950s, David and Peggy moved in with their grandmother, who lived 25 miles east of New Mexico. So she didn't sexually assault or abuse him, but she was not pleasant within his life. She was strict and apparently evil and would constantly abuse him. He ended up being lonely and spent most of the time walking around the grounds of the farm that they lived in alone. Around this time, David started to become very creative. He would go through scrapyards and junk piles to take apart and put back together again. This would be impressive for someone at the age of 10. To be fair play, it is. Are you gonna do it? There we go. So sadly, he would take his newfound form of creativity and skill and turning it into helping his sexual sadistic fantasies later on in life. He began writing his sexual desires in a diary. He wrote about how he intended to cause pain to women during sex. He said this began when he was 10 years old and he wanted to harm a woman with a broken glass bottle. For a while, he kept his sexual desires a secret in his diary until he turned 15 years old and wanted to find himself his first victim. So every time he would be approached by a girl, all he could think of was the different ways he could sexually violate her. And at some point in 1956, he found his first victim. So most of David's early crimes come from David himself, from everything he logged in his diary. Sadly, he would only log the year, the length, and the age of his victims, what he did to them, and that's about it. He wouldn't actually log their names or what he did to them afterwards. His first entries began in 1955. His first location was Ranch Grove. He claimed his first victim was 15 years old, the same age as him. And this was his first sexual experience, and that the two pretended that it was rape. He said he tied her to 2 trees with rope, holding her legs apart while he played with her. He said the girl enjoyed the experience, which means the experience was apparently consensual. But to be fair, I don't believe a single word this guy says, so I'm going to guess that it wasn't. Because his second diary entry has been written down as 1956, which was there the date listed. So apparently it was consensual, but I'm going to definitely say it probably wasn't, because the next diary entry, he says he put this down as his first kidnapping and his first rape. I mean, if his grandmother wasn't there, his auntie wasn't there, his mum wasn't there, every fucking family member wasn't there. Writing down he said that the victim was very pretty, and he noted that he kept her captive for an entire weekend, listing the location as Pine Shadow, Trent, New Mexico. He possibly took her from the local village and kept her there. He raped her and wrote down the details in his diary, and it is also possible that this was also his first murder at the age of 15, because nothing was ever reported to the police, and this was just the beginning. So the girl was probably murdered, which means that David would have killed his first victim when he was only 15 years old. So for the first time, David has finally committed an act of his long-desired sexual kink, and it wouldn't be long until before he took his kink out of control. By 1956, David was had just turned 16 years old and had already claimed his first victim. Shortly after this, David and Peggy moved in with their paternal grandparents, the Parkers. So his dad's parents. One of his classmates recalls that David was small for his age. They remember him being very quiet and refusing to look anyone in the eye. Apparently, whenever a girl would come by, his face would go red, showing that he had no social concept when it came to interacting with women. The boys would bully him at school for all of these points. They would even steal his scooter and damage it in front of him, and David would never stand up for himself, making his classmates believe that he could actually never do anything out of the ordinary. Obviously, they were very much unaware of what he had already done. While he carried on with high school, he carried on with his sexual desires. As he goes into 1957, David's first entry for this year into his diary included the details of another abduction and rape of a 17-year-old girl. The location of the act was apparently so secluded, experts are actually still discovering most of it to this day. This diary entry is a lot different to the previous one, since this one mentions an accomplice for the first time. His journal states, "Shirley helped me. The girl almost got away though. There was a lot of experiments performed on the girl. It's not known who Shirley actually really is and how she helped David exactly. So no one really knows if the girl escaped or was murdered as well, but there was no police reports about the abduction and rape from around this time. It's also possible that David and Shirley murdered this victim as well." It gets worse. Milk, it gets so much worse. David and Shirley continued their acts together later on that year by abducting a 20-year-old woman and taking her to the same location as their previous victim. In David's diary, he wrote, "Shirley set her up for kidnapping. This means that Shirley probably took the assistant role in the crimes and no one knows what she got out of this arrangement, so she just did it, from what we know." One speculation on how this happened was Shirley was friends with the girl and they were out drinking one night, and Shirley lured her away to David. The girl was probably offered drugs, which is how she ended up in the secluded cave to not get caught, and he forced her to the ground and tied her up with ropes. David told her everything that he was going to do to her before getting out his tools, piercing her skin with the tools all over her body before killing her and burying her in the desert. They carried on with their crime spree later on in the year when they found a third victim by accident. When they found a woman with a busted tire, they found out she was 17 years old and trusting, and that she had no one around to help her. When she let her guard down, they punched her and knocked her down, tied her up, and then placed her in the car before driving her to the same location as the previous victims. They grabbed their tools and carried out the rest of their sadistic sexual games. With most of David's victims, this woman would never be identified. She wasn't the only woman that David and Shirley kidnapped that year in 1957. They found another victim at a bus stop. She was 18 years old and they pretended to befriend her before kidnapping her and taking her to the exact same cave. They tied her up with her legs painfully spread apart, and David practiced a breast bondage technique which stops the circulation to the chest. Shirley pulled out the victim's pubic hair individually as her part of torture. They did various other parts of torment on their victims, many of which passing out over and over and over again just due to the pain. I did say this one's going to be the worst one yet. It's estimated that David and Shirley abducted and tortured 4 different women in 1957. David had become an experienced torturer and serial killer at just 17 years old. Let's do that to David. He'd probably like it. So I don't think we should, because I think he'd probably like it. In 1958, he graduated from high school, and because there wasn't much to do where he was, he moved to Albuquerque and became a mechanic. He found a good place to use his skills during the day, and at night he would go out to the local bars to try and find more victims. Even though David was torturing and kidnapping women for his sexual fantasies, he apparently looked for a more romantic relationship with someone at the same time. He began meeting women and eventually started a relationship with a 17-year-old girl. For what we know of, she had no ideas of the crimes that he committed. Also, her name is completely unknown because she didn't want to be known to the public, especially when all the crimes came out. Yep, do it. The connection between the two was strong and powerful, apparently, and after only a few months of dating, the two got married in 1959. During this time, David experienced a growth spurt, and he went from 5'6" at graduation to 6'2". He joined the military, and a few days after his wedding day, as a mechanic. He was stationed in Korea, and even though he probably never saw any crossfire, investigators suspect his sexual behaviour didn't stop while he was there, so they still think that whilst being in the military, it might have affected his mental state. During brief moments of leave, David managed to get his wife pregnant, and in 1960 she gave birth to David's first child, a boy that they named David Elvin Ray. Days after the birth of their son, David had to go back to Korea. That's quite normal, to be fair. The distance and the constant leaving for work soon took a toll on the marriage, and David's wife ended up filing for... she didn't file for divorce. David's wife ended up giving up their son to the New Mexico State Department of Public Welfare. David returned home and filed for divorce and got full custody of his son. However, this was with no objection from his ex-wife. He left his son with his mother, and actually, while he was redeployed to Texas. However, while David was on leave, he met another woman and married her in the winter of 1962 and abandoned his son. The marriage didn't last long, however, and the two were actually divorced 2 months later. Not long later, David was discharged from the military. Ew. Tell him why you're sending me twigs. Not too long later, David was discharged from the military. He then moved back to New Mexico and got a truck driving job. He was still abducting and raping women, and he actually claimed 2 more victims a year, sometimes even more. All of which unidentified, either they were murdered or refused to go to the police out of fear from their experience, but no one will ever know. Throughout this time, David escalated his terrors, and in 1963, he kidnapped 2 girls to practice a new torture technique. One of his victims was a 22-year-old victim, and the other was a 25-year-old hitchhiker. Both of them victims, we know. He wanted to practice with electroshock therapy. By attaching jumper cables to their breasts, he would use enough power to make it feel like their bodies were on fire. He would then perfect his method later on, where it wouldn't be noticeable if they're on their bodies afterwards. So they actually got quite a few scars from this little practice of his, but his later victims would apparently leave with no wounds. Yep, told you it's grim, this one. By 1963, David Parker Ray was only 23 years old and had possibly murdered and tortured and raped over 20 women. Okay, no problem. In 1966, David met a woman called Glenda Burdine. She was 18 years old with a toddler of her own and was looking for someone to help raise her child. David was a tall 26-year-old man with a steady job, and the two actually got married in a shotgun wedding very close to the time that they originally met. On the 2nd of May 1967, they had their first child together, who they named Glenda Jean Ray. Shortly later, David lived with his new family, but then abandoned his 3 children. He became a drifter, moving all over the United States quite quickly, using his mechanic skills to do odd jobs here and there to make enough money to get by. Those who met him at the time thought he was charismatic and intelligent, but he soon got tired of his life and moved back home and tried to get going back to Glenda, which she actually accepted. He became a drifter. Sorry, one second. I'm going to turn the music off because it's just a bit disturbing. He became a drifter, moving all over the United States quite quickly, using his mechanic... Sorry, I've already just said that bit. I'm just rereading it. I apologise. He soon took up a course in aeroplane mechanics. He passed amazingly and became an aeroplane mechanic quite quickly. He moved his family to Tulsa for the job. According to his kids, he was apparently a great father, but one of his kids is a bit fucked up in the head, as we will later find out. Even with this, he still started the night, kidnapping and torturing and raping at least 2 women a year. In 1973, when he was just 33 years old, he kidnapped 5 different women. 2 were hitchhikers that he picked up and tortured, and 2 he picked up at a bar. And the 5th victim, I apologize for this next one. I forgot about this one. Everything else completely clouded over it, and I apologize for this next one. The 5th victim was a 30-year-old mother who had her infant son with her when he picked them both up. I apologize for this bit. I apologize. No, he was 33. I say he was 33. Now, when he was 13, he just had the interest. He hadn't done anything yet. So he's 33 at this point. He took them to Elephant Butte Lake. This location became perfect for David, as the lake is a killer's dream. So the lake starts off shallow, then has a huge dip, which actually takes you down like over 100 feet. And at the bottom of the lake, it's kind of like really, really weird. So at the bottom of the lake, if something actually does hit the bottom of the lake, it just swallows it up. Perfect for him! So apparently he tortured the 30-year-old mother and then murdered her and her son before putting their bodies in the lake. Which is really, really sad. In 1986, David Parker was 46 years old and had been abducting, raping and torturing women for over 30 years. He was thorough with his crimes and cover-up because he was never arrested nor investigated by the police. However, this all changed in 1986 when his own daughter Jessie went to the FBI. So Jessie had actually grown up very much aware of her father's sexual fantasies from him sharing images displaying such acts to her when she was only a child. Very similar to what his dad did to him, but we all know David Parker Ray's interests were a lot more extreme. It's fucking disgusting, Milk. I'm not gonna lie to you. It ain't pleasant. She knew of his crimes and that they were very much illegal. However, she thought that they were just a part of everyday human behaviour because she was so used to it. However, when she got into a fight with her father, she decided to get revenge by reporting him to the FBI. The cause of the fight is actually unknown. However, Jessie seems to have only gone to the FBI for her own selfish reasons. And you know what? She's a fucking bitch. I don't care. She gets worse. She gets so much worse than this. She doesn't go to the FBI just due to the fact that what her dad is doing is fucking disgusting. She goes to the FBI because she's angry at her dad. Okay. Like, yeah, great, you went to the FBI, but you're not doing it for the right reasons at the end of the day. But also, you are a massive cunt because I know exactly what you do next. So information appeared to be very much interesting, obviously, to the FBI agents. They were shocked by what she has explained and everything that he has done. She told them of his sexual fantasies before dropping the big bombshell of him abducting and possibly even selling women in downtown New Mexico in a sex slave trade. Her accusations were so shocking, they immediately began an investigation into David Parker Ray and even started looking for victims, but they couldn't find any. Yeah, apparently he was. Apparently he was doing a bit of everything. Fucking... How the hell... One thing that baffled me was how he wasn't caught, but obviously we know how he wasn't caught, but how was no one reported missing? Especially because some of them were, like, missing for weeks on end, but none of them were reported missing. It was so confusing. So they brought... Who the fuck would buy a woman? Sick bastards! That's who. They brought David in multiple times for questioning, and when they brought him in, he mentioned quite openly about his sexual fantasies, and even spoke about his ads that he posted for sex toys and sexual partners. He said that since he was 13, he had been obsessed with BDSM and Satanism. He said that when his urges kicked in, he fantasized about what he could do to women, including killing them. He practically told the FBI everything about what he'd been doing, and the investigation went on for an entire year from around 1986 to the summer of 1987. They failed to find any evidence or wrongdoing on David's part because Jessie couldn't give the names of any of the victims, so they just believed that the accusations were the admission of a rambling madman and a bitchy daughter. So the case was then closed. They didn't look into it. David was left alone to carry on killing women after this. He then even abducted and potentially killed 2 women during the FBI's investigation on him. So one of them was a 25-year-old sex worker, so naturally we weren't going to investigate because the police are dicks and they don't care about sex workers. Let's be realistic, they don't. He had her for 2 weeks. Whether he killed her, sold her as a sex slave, or let her go, no one really knows. Yeah, I feel like never going outside again. Nah, I'm alright. The second woman was a 15-year-old who he found hitchhiking home from school. Oh my god, this part is disgusting. But to be fair, I've heard a lot of men in this day and age say very similar things about what he said about this woman. He said in his diary entry, and I have definitely heard a few blokes say this, he preferred her because she was smaller, like a Barbie doll, and easier to handle. I have heard people say similar shit to that. I have heard that shit. That's just like, bleh. You're pedo. If you say that shit, you're a pedo. Yeah, agreed. Somehow these 2 victims went completely unnoticed by the FBI, even though they were investigating him at the time and bringing him in for questioning all the time. Oh, Jesus, Milt. Thank you, Barricade, for the follow. Thank you so much. I'm happy to see that you're enjoying this. It doesn't care about what you're wearing either, because these people are just dickheads. So sometime in 1986, Jessie made up with her father, and it was only a matter of time before she helped him out with his crimes. There we go, people. The girl that reported him to the FBI because she had a fight with him and she was a bit pissed off at her dad helps him out eventually with everything that she just reported him on. There you go. That's why I called her a cunt. You say that, you're a pedo. If you say that you like younger women because they're like a doll and they're easier to handle and pick up and toss around, then you're a fucking pedo. You're a pedo for getting off with younger girls anyway. That young anyway. So yep, Jessie, his daughter, who did report him to the FBI originally, actually makes it a bit worse because she eventually helps him out with everything that he does. So throughout David's mechanics job, he managed to have half of the business eventually, which helped him to afford to own 2 houses. His business partner said that he wanted to sell his part of the business because he didn't really want to be involved in mechanics anymore, which is fair enough. This angered David, and his partner Billy was so scared at the time, he told his own family that he thinks that someone might kill him. He even wrote in employee handbooks given out to everyone but David that if something happened to him, they should ring the police if he ever goes missing. So very soon later, Billy goes missing. His co-workers and family members immediately rang the police, and straight away an investigation was opened. They questioned David, and he denied any wrongdoing or any part in Billy's disappearance. The police were still suspicious of David, but because there wasn't any evidence or a body, not much could be done. In the same year, David abducted 2 more women in Phoenix. One was an 18-year-old sex worker, the other was a 16-year-old runaway. I think he kidnapped the person. We'll wait and see. They were tied together for 2 weeks. He said he shared them with a friend, showing that he had another accomplice that was unknown. He then bought a trailer, which would then be soundproofed, and he started building his homemade torture devices inside. Eventually, this trailer would become his infamous toy box. Ergo, the toy box killer. In September 1989, only a few miles away from David's home, a fisherman noticed a tarp floating in the water. He immediately called the police, and when they attempted to bring it into the boat, they noticed that it had 2 anchors attached to it. The body was of a man that had been clearly submerged for a long time. From the side of the man, he had been murdered from a single shot to the head. The body was so badly decomposed that he was unrecognizable. However, when this all got out to the public, the only person who knew who the man was David. The body was actually of Billy, David's former business partner, who had gone missing just a year before. His body had risen up to the lake, and Billy was the only one of David was the only one of David's victims whose body was ever found. So there you go, you're right, you did kidnap Billy. In 1989, David Parker Ray had been abducting women for 34 of his 49 years of life, which is insane. Over the next several years, he collected more torture tools and even collected a bench from a gym and added straps and leg rests to represent a gynecologist chair. I call it gyno, but gynecologist chair. But with a painful twist. This one made everything in my body just clench and want to die. With a painful twist, so he added an electronic wire so that he could send electronic shocks into his victim's body. Now, I hate to make you visualize it, but gyno chair, electronic wire, electroshock going into body. You can guess where it was going to be put. Oh, believe me, I said the exact same thing and I fucking screamed it out when I heard that bit. I was like, are you taking the piss? Like, Jesus Christ. Like, I literally wanted to die at the thought of that. That just... Then again, it's a torture device. That is exactly what it's for. Clearly. Oh, it's disgusting. So, he was still... Back to it. You get what if you're a female or you have been if you have identified if you got a fanny, you know what it is. Hey, it's a you got a fanny, you know what it is. So he was still abducted. Zappy's nerd with Jesus. Yeah. He was still abducting women while he was in Phoenix. He even recorded a tape that he would play when his victims woke up in the torture chamber. He would explain on the tape what he was going to do to them and taunting them about how scared they must be. In that same year, he tested out the effects of this tape when he abducted 2 sex workers. He abducted them at 2 different times. One he kept for 4 days and the other he kept for 5, and he played the tape for both of them. He watched them break down crying before doing what he said he would do to them. He said that he used yeah, so it's kind of like Saw. I thought of Saw when I heard that. As soon as I heard that, I just thought I thought Saw. That's immediately what I thought of. He said that he used ankle wenches to widen their pelvises to simulate the feeling of childbirth. A barbed steel bra, nipple screws, and weights. See, I know in this situation I wouldn't laugh. But I feel like I would laugh. But I know I wouldn't laugh. But you know, you feel like you would do, but you definitely wouldn't. So after his darkest desires increased and his plans got increasingly worse, his other life started to wither. Him and his wife, Joni Lee, at the time, started having marital issues, and she said that she knew what he liked but refused to do. He said that she knew what he liked sexually, but she didn't want to do any of it. Fair enough, it's fucking weird. I've always thought that. Have I walked past a serial killer at some point in my life and just not known it? So he said that she was jealous of other women, which is what caused them to drift apart. And he also said over the years she got more and more crazy and started having epileptic fits. She's not crazy, she's doing an epileptic fit. Ew, cunts. So he said, yeah, she got more and more crazy, and at one point she held a knife to his head. Do you know what? Fucking preacher, I don't care. After what we know he's done. Fucking good girl. Love you, Joni. So the two got divorced in 1994. With the breakdown of the marriage, both of them moved out of the house, and David even sold his second home. He moved into a smaller town with fewer mechanic jobs available, but he eventually got a job at the state park. You've given the man so much fucking areas. This would give him a government uniform, possibly making him even more dangerous. So I'm not going to blame them for giving him the job, so obviously they don't, because obviously they didn't know, but this is like the worst thing. The fact that he's got a job in such an open plan area is like, are you fucking kidding me? He moved to a smaller town. Sorry, I've already read that, but I do that with books as well, you know. David took full advantage of the uniform as it made him appear much more trusting to his future victims. Of course it fucking would. This made abducting women a lot easier. This allowed him to also drive to different secluded areas across the state park, giving him more areas to commit his crimes and dump the bodies. And I know it's fucking rancid, innit? In 1995, he abducted 3 more women, all of them young in age. No one knows how old, by the way. Unfortunately, he didn't write that bit down on this one. He upgraded his toy box with medical books and kits to keep them alive for longer. He bought boxes the size of coffins to place the women inside of, and he put them under a bench, making it possible for him to capture 2 different women at the same time and keep them both hostage for longer periods of time. Hey, good vibes. This made the fear in the victims. This made the fear that the victims had of him a lot stronger. Even worse, if he held 2 other women at the same time, they could hear the whimpers and cries of the other women as he tortured them, which obviously made the fear a lot stronger. He continued abducting women until 1996. The most infamous one would happen on the 25th of July. He was in his home longing for another victim, and he started taking Viagra at the time as he got older, which he found as a godsend. The phone rang with his daughter Jessie on the other line. Bitch. She had called to say that she would be coming home soon with another toy for him to play with. So yeah, there you go. His daughter is helping him out with the crimes as well at this point. He went to his toy box and began to prepare everything. He rewound the tape and selected the torture devices that he wanted to use. At the same time, a 23-year-old woman named Kelly Van Cleve, she had gone out drinking with a few of her friends after a fight with her husband. He constantly wanted to have sex, but for her, sex was always painful. She had no idea why at the time. So for the night out, so far the night out had helped her forget about the fight. She was the driver that night, so she didn't really have anything to drink at all. Mother, I'm never going out again. Can't blame you. I'll probably do the same. One of those friends was Jessie Ray, who offered her a lift home. They went back to Jessie's motorbike. The two of them climbed on, and Jessie turned down the wrong road. Jessie pointed out that they went the wrong way, and Jessie said that she was a little bit tipsy and that she needs to go home for some coffee to sober herself up. They pulled into the driveway of David's home, and Jessie told Kelly to sit down on the sofa in the living room and said that she wouldn't be too long. Kelly looked away for a second, thinking of her husband, and then from the other room, David came running in and he held a long, sharp knife to her face and said that she was his now and she had to do what he says. I know, it's so fucking sick and twisted milk. So Jessie came back into the room holding a dog collar and handcuffs. She put them on Kelly and marched Kelly to the toy box at knife point. He opened the door and the smell of sweat, tears, and death filled out. There's a sign on the wall that read, "Welcome to Satan's Den," with hand-drawn images of torture methods. The weight bench was in the center of the room, and they strapped her down to the chair. They raised her legs and spread them apart. They got a knife and cut off her clothes. He grabbed the video camera and attached it to the TV, where David explains what he would do to her. So he decided to play the tape. The next few days were a blur. Kelly only remembers moments of the abuse she received from David, and especially when he would use oversized sex toys on her. He said he would use her for the satanic ritual that he had planned. For Kelly's oversized, oversized, incredibly big, whatever you want to call it. So for Kelly, sex was already painful enough, even when it was consensual, so the oversized objects made this experience even more painful. Kelly didn't know it at the time, but she actually had a tilted uterus. This means that the uterus is actually angled backwards, so it causes it to stretch over, it causes to stretch some internal organs, so that's why it's really, really painful for her. David grew frustrated and said that he couldn't get the instruments of torture far enough into her. And that she was useless to him and his cult as a sex toy. He said they had no problem getting rid of her. Over the next 3 days, Kelly remembered David torturing her at least 6 separate times, and by the 3rd day, David was even more annoyed. He injected a series of drugs into her arm, and she said that she could feel the memories of the last few days leaving her as she blacked out. The last thing she remembered is David pushing her out of his car wearing his state park uniform, and as she turned her head, she noticed that she was out of the toy box and that she was in front of a normal house, that house being her in-laws' house that her and her husband were staying in at the time. He grabbed her arm and brought her into the garden and knocked on the door. Her husband and his parents answered and glared at her. They asked her where she had been, but she said that she couldn't remember. So they got really, really angry and thought that she'd actually just ran off to be with another guy. David chimed in and said that he found her wandering the lake around the state park and that she was insanely drunk. They said that they actually ended up turning her away at the doorstop and actually told her that they were going to file for a divorce and that she could never come back. David brought her back into his truck. He dropped her off at her friend's house and said that she is free to go. Over the next few years, memories slowly began to come back to her, but she couldn't be certain if these were memories or not. So she never really went to the police about them because she just thought that they were like a really dark dream. She was unknown to her. She was actually the first victim of David's who actually lived. But David didn't stop what he was doing for another 3 years. After this, Jessie and David met a woman named Cynthia. She had an abusive boyfriend who she did drugs with, and she broke up with her boyfriend as she moved to New Mexico. You searched the chair. Why did you search the chair? Don't search that chair. You'd already searched the chair. So she hung around the bar scene, which is where she met Jesse and David. She became attracted to David and they started a relationship. She then met a younger man named Yancey, who had been convicted of murdering another man. She introduced him to David and Jesse, and they all became close friends because they all had a shared interest in drugs and alcohol, and they all just kept meeting up to get really, really drunk and high. They should have just carried on doing that, if I'm being honest, and just fucked off and left everything else alone. They also realised that they all had a mutual interest in sexual sadism. I have wine. Soon later, David and Jesse showed Cynthia and Yancey his toy box. But hey Matt, how you doing? No one knows how many victims they actually tortured with David and Jesse. However, one other victim is actually known. In the early months of 1987, Yancey dated a woman named Marie Parker. He treated her badly, and the two actually broke up, with Marie dumping him. Yancey took this personally and convinced David to abduct her. She was soon reported missing, but her friends couldn't find her, and the case actually remains open to this day. This case is fucking disgusting. This is grim. So, meanwhile, while everyone was searching out for Marie, she was locked in David's toy box by David, Jesse, and Yancey, and also Cynthia. And they took turns torturing the girl for days, and possibly even weeks. David told Yancey to kill her and get rid of her body, and he did, and he did as he was told, and strangled her before tossing her body out of the car and burying her in the desert. Now, we only know that this actually happened because Yancey did confess to this murder. When I talk about true crime stuff, never research any of it unless you never research how they did certain shit. Never research Jack the Ripper. Fucking hell, you see everything. Over the next 2 years, David, Cynthia, and Yancey abducted and tortured a number of women. Yancey travelled out of town eventually, and Jesse got her own place, but Cynthia moved into David's house, and their next crime that they did together took place on the 17th of February 1999, when David was 59 years old and Cynthia was 39. They were all well known in the partying community in their town. So was a woman that they befriended called Angelica. Angelica was known around the area for her glass eye. Her friends also said she was kind and friendly and loved baking. Since her boyfriend's birthday was coming up, she wanted to bake a cake for him, and David and Cynthia told her that they had some unused cake mix back at their house that she could use. Angelica went around to her place. She had known them for quite some time now, so she trusted them completely, as she would. When they entered the home, David pulled a knife out of his pocket and held it up to her. She thought he was joking before he punched her in the stomach. They stripped her down and chained her to a bed, and they forced her to take drugs and listen to David's recorded message. They raped and tortured her for around 2 days before taking her to the toy box, where they increased the torture, one of which mostly being electronic torture. Angelica was chained to the gyno chair for 3 days. She began to lose hope, but in one moment of trying to escape, she decided to pretend that she was enjoying the torture, which is the complete opposite of what David wanted. On her 5th day of captivity, David was torturing her on his own. She told him that she enjoyed their time together and asked when she could go. Her boys would be missing her, and she said that she would never tell a soul about this. After all, she said she had enjoyed all of it. In that moment that shocked everyone when it was discovered, David let her go. Cynthia actually just disagreed with this quite a lot, because she said that Angelica would definitely go to the police. But on Sunday, the 21st of February, they cleaned Angelica up, drove her away, and dropped her off on the side of the road before driving off again. Angelica walked down the road and tried to hitchhike her way back home. A off-duty police deputy pulled over and offered her a ride. She got in the car and told him about how her friends had kidnapped her, tortured her, and raped her for 5 days straight. She detailed the sexual tortures and about how they had also let her go. However, Gary, the officer, didn't believe a single word she said. According to reports, the more intoxicated someone is, the police won't believe them when it comes to reports of sexual assault. That's just reports, but I've also had experience with that as well, just want to say. When Gary picked her up, she was still affected by the drugs that she was forced to take by David and Cynthia. I know. So he didn't believe her because he thought that she was still high. He didn't believe her until a month later when everything came out of the blue, when everything just came out to the public. On the 20th of March 1999, David Parker Ray and Cynthia drove to Albuquerque in their RV with full intentions of picking up a sex worker. In a short matter of time, they picked up a woman named Cindy V. Hill. When she got into the car, Cynthia popped out of the bathroom and electrocuted her and put her in a box before driving her all the way back to David's home, which was 150 miles south of Albuquerque. Whenever she made a motion towards an exit when they electrocuted her again, they put a metal dog collar in her neck and chained it to the wall. They put on David's tape and she was terrified straight away and started praying. She either prayed that they would eventually let her go or that she could just die quickly. So for 2 days they both raped and tortured her. Sometimes they would unchain her so she could go to the bathroom, but her collar always remained on. She began to lose hope by the 22nd of March, and after a round of rape and torture, he loosened her chains so she could go to the toilet again. They had more planned that day, so he kept the chains a little more loose than usual. V. Hill could hear Cindy in the next room watching TV when she noticed something shiny next to her. So Cynthia had actually left the keys to the locks that unlock her ankles and her wrists right next to her. She stretched and reached to grab the keys to the point where she was actually in a lot of pain, but after a few minutes she finally grabbed them and unlocked her wrists and her ankles. She tried to unlock the collar as well, but it was a different lock, and she immediately began to panic, until she looked up and noticed that the lock chained to the wall was the same as the one that was attached to her ankles and her wrists. She unlocked the chain and ran from the room. When she entered the other room, she saw Cindy was on the sofa blocking the exit. Cindy grabbed a lamp and tried hitting her over the head with it, but missed. V. Hill grabbed an ice pick and stabbed her with it before running out the door. People saw the girl running out of the house naked, only wearing a dog collar, and they brought her into their house until the police came. She explained everything to the police, and they went over to capture David, and they found him with Cindy searching around for her. Well, they found him with Cynthia searching around for Cindy. They arrested him on the spot, finally bringing 59-year-old David Parker Ray down. It took some time to find everything about David, but when they went into the toy box and found everything, including a tape where David explained and had evidence of torturing a woman with a distinctive tattoo. Police then realized this woman was Kelly Van Cleve. She had moved away at this point to California, and she had spent the last few years of her life thinking her memories were just a dark dream. She was very, very shocked, to say the least, when she found out they were actually all real and actually testified against David in court. Even the deputy, Gary Laver, remembered the conversation that he had with the hitchhiker a month before, who he didn't believe at the time, but now he did. He got in touch with Angelica, and she was also shocked that he had finally been brought to justice, and she was eager to testify against him. Police found David's diary entries and demanded David explain every one of them. He did just that, except for giving them the names of his victims. So even if he did remember them, he never said them anyway. He confessed to everything he confessed to absolutely everything. They also questioned Jesse and Cynthia. Jesse refused to give her father up, but Cynthia told them absolutely everything David has told her, including the murders from when he was 15 years old all the way up to now. Oh man, I missed it. Will it be going up on YouTube later? Yes, it will be, Morty. Do not worry. So yeah, Jesse refused to give up her father, but Cynthia told the police absolutely everything. After this, they also arrested Yancey, who confessed to all of his murders, including the one on his ex-girlfriend Maria, and his involvement in the crimes, and that's how they know that Maria was one of the victims. Investigators searched everywhere for the bodies, but found absolutely nothing. The only body that was ever found was the body of Billy, David's former business partner. David was actually never convicted of murder. but the reason why he was never convicted of murder was because the body of Billy was obviously so decomposed, they didn't actually know it was Billy, and David never told them that it was Billy. So he was never convicted of murder, but because 3 people testified against him, Cynthia being one of them, he was charged for all these crimes. He was charged for 3... Actually, no. Angelica, Kelly, and Cindy. Yeah, three women. Sorry, I thought Cynthia would have been one of them, but she's definitely not. She definitely was one of the people that got arrested. So they testified against him, and he was charged for 3 of the crimes. He was charged with 3 accounts of kidnapping, assault, unlawful sexual penetration, and more others related to those crimes. He was sentenced to 224 years in prison. For the next 8 months, he was interrogated by various members of law enforcement, but on the 28th of May 2002, he was placed in a holding cell while his paperwork was being processed, and Thank you, Sweden Official, for the follow. Glad to see you're enjoying the stream, and welcome. So yeah, while his paperwork was being processed, and after being in the cell for only a few minutes, so as soon as he was put in the cell, after a couple minutes, his heart stopped. He had a massive heart attack when he got put into the cell that killed him instantly, and he was officially declared dead at 8:40 p.m. So he died at the age of 59. And that, everyone, is the crimes of David Parker Ray. That's it. That is the crimes of David Parker Ray. Yeah, I told you that one was going to be fucking disgusting, and I apologize to everyone about how disgusting it actually was. So, that's such a BS ending, I'm not gonna lie. I know, right? The fact I was expecting him to get like executed, but no, he dies out of a heart attack the second he walks into his cell. Bet you any money it wasn't. I think everyone else can vouch for the fact that it's not a pleasant one. But for the people on YouTube, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and get ready for another True Crime Friday next week.